Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone can hear me okay, right? Okay, it's important. So thank you, Nadina, for introducing us. We kind of threw her in last minute. So like Nadina said, this is the second in our series. Tonight we're going to talk about writing, rewriting, and editing, as it says up on the screen. So I'm going to start by talking about writing, how we do it at Wix, the Wix way of writing. And the Wix way is something that we have internally, how we refer to like our writing principles. So we call it, or I'm sorry, not the writing principles, the principles of all of Wix, and we've kind of adopted that to anything that could be the Wix way of doing something. So we have the Wix way of writing. Dan probably has in his slides the Wix way of editing, and that's what we're going to look at. So what we're talking about is how we do it here. But we hope that these are things that can be applied no matter where you are, no matter if you're the only UX writer in your company, if you are not even in a company yet, if you are in a huge team. They're just things that we have kind of honed over time and that we hope can be useful to the rest of the community. So let's go ahead and get started. Just first, a little bit about me. I'm Jenny, as I said. I'm the head of UX writers here at Wix. I've been at Wix for about 4.5 years. I am originally from Seattle, Washington. Now I live in Ra'anana, which if you're not in Israel, is just north of Tel Aviv. I love to travel, so this is a photo up very big on the screen, of me and my husband on a glacier in Alaska last year. I also love to read and do theater, just so you get to know me a little bit more. And I like to call myself a recovering long-form writer. So I was that person in grad school when they said, you have 15 to 18 pages for this paper, and mine was 20, and I was figuring out how I was gonna make it 18 pages. And it was not by cutting words. So when I started in this job, I was like, how are they letting me be a UX writer? Because you have to write concisely and in small spaces, and that is not what I'm good at. But through the things that I've learned by being a UX writer here at Wix, I really learned to hopefully be good at it, but also really learn to find the joy in it and the challenge of writing in a small space. So we're going to talk about the foundation. Before we look at the actual writing principles, I think it's really important because the basis of everything that we do helps further explain the writing principles. We are going to talk about then how we maintain consistency, or at least try to, and a short wrap up. Okay, so like I said, before we talk about the actual principles, it's really important to talk about everything that underlies it, because none of it is possible if we don't. So the first is the Wix Voice. So the Wix Voice is how we sound as a company and write as a company across all disciplines, not just UX. So a note, because we'll probably talk about it here, but at Wix we have a system of guilds. We have a writers guild, which is made up of 200 plus writers of all disciplines. So UX writers were a small subset of that. We have marketing writers, knowledge-based writers, localization writers, chatbot, everything. And as a guild, we came together to come up with the Wix Voice a year or 2 years ago. And we workshopped it and we talked about what do we want to sound like, how do we want to interact with users, and we came up with these 5 tenets. So we are straightforward. We tell it like it is. We don't sugarcoat it. We don't use fluff. We don't use jargon. We are professional. So we recognize that our users are also professionals. Most of our users are using Wix to run a business or a livelihood. So we talk to them like the professionals that they are. We are inspiring, so we want to help users keep moving along the journey. We want to help them keep reaching success. We're supportive, so we celebrate their wins, and we also help them when something goes wrong. We don't just leave them hanging. And we're conversational, and this is something you're going to hear a lot tonight. Hi, welcome, come on in, find a seat wherever. So we are eye level, we're friendly, but conversational is really how we define it. So we do say it, write it. So we like to say, pretend like you're talking to a friend on the phone. And the on the phone part is really important because when you're on the phone, you don't have context. And we also don't have a lot of context when you're talking to someone talking through a computer screen. And a friend is because You wouldn't use big words, you wouldn't worry about grammar, you wouldn't sound super formal if you're talking to a friend. So after the Wix Voice, the next layer is our organizational structure, which sounds a little bit weird, but we are embedded in the product team. And this is really key to what we do and how we do it. So we are sitting with all of the stakeholders on the products that we work on. So we're sitting with developers, we're sitting with the product managers, with designers. That means that we are part of the product development from the beginning. Also, hence why we are doing a product lifecycle series. So we're there for kickoff, we're there for brainstorming, we're there making product decisions before we've even written a word or had to sit down and think about what we need to write. We're also there influencing the hierarchy of the page so that when we do sit down to write, it's built in a way that makes sense for us. So this is really crucial. Then is how we define our job. So we say that our job is to make products easier to understand and use by crafting the conversation with users. Notice we don't say our job is to like write words, which would be a terrible job description anyway, but we make the product easier to use. How? We talk with the user, we have a conversation, and defining ourselves this way, not as specifically saying we write or we edit or we proofread or anything like that. That's not what we do. That's not how we see it. We craft the conversation, we build the conversation with the user so that they can use our products. And then lastly is the tools. So just to touch on this quickly, so we only write an actual design. For us, that's Figma. And that allows us to see from the beginning what our content looks like in the design. How much space do we have? Some of the principles that we'll talk about in a second, like putting the most crucial information first. Let's say we want to do that in a modal. We have this great 2 sentences written out, but then we see it in Figma, and while we're writing it and we see the font is huge, and we need to cut that down. And we know from the beginning that where we need to cut things, where we need to put things, what space we have to work with. Also, nothing is hard-coded, which I know is a luxury. So we have a content management system. We work with keys and strings. So anytime that we want to make a change to content, we can just go in and do it, and we own it. And besides that, making it easier at any time, I really think it makes us able to write better. Because let's say we're working on a new product or a new feature as part of a product, and we realize that to better explain that feature that we're adding, we actually need to go back and we need to change the way we were talking about something else throughout the entire flow. If we don't own the content, if it's something that you have to rely on dev, it becomes a question. It really impacts your writing. Can I make this change? Will someone give me resources to make this change? And maybe it changes what you're able to write just because of limitations. So because nothing's hard-coded, we can do whatever we need to. We can make whatever change we need when it comes to content. And lastly, we also have dynamic content. We can work with our developers to use variables, whether that's user-generated content like the name of a blog post, or to be able to recognize you've selected 3 items, do you want to delete these? And that just also gives us more to play with and makes it easier for us to follow some of these principles. Okay, so that's the foundation. Now let's actually get into the meat of it. So these are just some of the principles and the guidelines that we use at Wix. It was kind of hard to narrow it down because we only have 20 minutes together, but we'll give it a shot. This is the most important thing that, again, is behind everything that we do. It's not about us. It is not about us, it's about the user. So there's a couple different puzzle pieces here. One is we look at user intent. So what do they actually want to do? And how high is their intent when they're here? Their state of mind, what are they thinking or what are they feeling? When they get here, the user journey, what's the benefit to the user, which we'll also talk about in a second. And then it all goes through the funnel of say it, write it. And these are some of the questions that we ask. Who sees this? How often? What are they feeling? We try not to make just sort of baseless assumptions, right? Like we want to figure out the user intent, so we ask ourselves questions like this. Why are they coming here? What do they want? Also the benefit, what do they get out of it? Where are they in the journey? What did they see before? And what are they going to see after? Because we can't just look at it, we have to look at it holistically. Then we have the questions that we answer. So this is my favorite writing tool. It's not rocket science, but it is very effective. It's called the 3 W's, the what, so what, now what. The what is this? The so what is why should I care? And the now what is what do I do next? And if you have ever seen any pop-up on the web, which I'm sure we all have, they all follow this structure. Title, subtitle, body, that's it. That's the structure. But it really helps us as writers figure out the most, how we lay out the information to the user. So I want to show an example of this. So this is the marketing home. And we can see the what, so what, now what here in a lot of different ways. And so just to show that it's not just within a component, it's how we can structure all content. So we have the what, the marketing home, the so what, use these tools to drive traffic to your site and reach a wider audience. And the now what is actually anything that you can do on this page. So we're starting at the top with the what and the so what, and we're letting them then read through the rest of the page. You can do a suggestion, take a tour, track your recent campaigns, making it really simple and clear what their next things are that they could do. But then we also have within each component. So the what in this first card is get listed on Google. The so what, so people can find your site. The now what, go for it. The what, track your recent campaigns. Why should I care? So people keep interacting with your brand. The now what, start a campaign. So if you hadn't thought about it this way before, you will never be able to unsee it, so you're welcome. But this really is a way to help structure the answers to the questions that we asked ourselves before. Another tool that we use is we look at, is content feature-driven, intent-driven, or benefit-driven? And let's look at the differences between those three. So feature-driven is, you can do this thing. We're giving you this thing that you can use. If you've ever gotten a wireframe from a product manager who was very, very excited about this new feature that they're creating, it's probably feature-driven content that they wrote in their wireframe. So on the marketing home, we have these cards, like the Get Listed card. And this is a feature-driven one. So send beautiful emails. Wix email marketing lets you send beautiful emails. Intent-driven is, here's what we think you want to do with this thing. So those questions that we asked before, here's what we think you want to do. Create an email campaign, very simply speaking to what we think your intent is when you come here. Then there's benefit-driven, and benefit-driven is, here's what you get when you do this thing. So here, we would say reach more people. So we're starting with the benefit. We try really hard to stay away from feature-driven content, but it's important to say that intent-driven and benefit-driven is not it's not necessarily that there's one better than the other. It really depends on context. So the marketing home, if we think or we know from data that most users come to the marketing home as an entry point to the rest of our tools. They come and they know what they want to do. They're just looking for how to do it, or for the entry to the tool to do it. So we might go with something intent-driven to make it easier for them to continue in the journey. But if we think or we know that actually users come to this page because they have no idea what they want to do, they just know what they want to happen, we would lead with benefit-driven. So both have their place, and I just want to look at a little quick example of this. So we have a hotels product, and we had content that at first was feature-driven. So even using, again, like Wix email marketing, the name of the feature, extra charges is what we called that internally. Set your seasonal rates, not really telling me anything that I get from that. We did an A/B test, and we changed it to be benefit-driven. So offer more to your guests, send a welcome message, add a personal touch, really focusing on what it is the user gets out of these tools that they can use. And the benefit-driven won by a lot, which I really think these numbers are amazing. So 60% increase in number of saved emails, 86% increase in the number of clicks on this bottom card, and most interestingly, a 15% increase in premium purchases. So from this, we can infer that when we're leading with the benefit, or at least in this case and where users were at this part in their journey, it really resonates with users, and they're more willing to invest. They want to invest because they see what they're getting out of it. Lastly, in terms of principles, I want to talk about writing for all types of readers. So some of you are writers, most of you are writers, you're probably told, oh, nobody reads anything, or people just skim. All of that is true, but there are people read in all sorts of different ways, and we want to write for all of those types to get everybody the information that they need. So we're just gonna break down a modal here. So first is putting the most crucial information first and last. That's for the people who really do skim. So all I need to know is I clicked a button and I got this pop-up and it's saying inspect your site pages on Google, go to Google Search Console. The other information I think is helpful to have, but I don't need any of it to understand that you need me to go somewhere else, and I'm gonna go somewhere else when I click on this. Then we have front-loading information. So some people do read just a little bit. So here we're saying inspect your site pages on Google. Why? Because we can currently only inspect sites with up to 600 pages. Okay, cool, got it. I'll go to the Google Search Console now. Then, of course, we want to put all the necessary information in. Just because not everyone will read it, we want to make sure that it's there and available. We don't want to put too much. We don't want to put too little. We want it to be concise, but we want it to be there. And also, I like to think about it being there. If someone sees this modal, something like this several times, maybe they don't read it the first time or the second time. If they see it the third time, maybe they're like, why do I keep getting this? Then the information is there to explain it. And then lastly, point to more information. Some people just really like to read. Some people need more help. This isn't in every case. If there's not much else to say, you don't need to send them to knowledge base or an external source. But if there is something more to say, it's helpful to have it. And we try to use descriptive links, so not a learn more or a read more, but something that really helps me understand where am I going to go when I click on this link. So all of that is good. We have 60 plus writers across 3 continents, 7 countries, 5 time zones, and a gazillion products. So how do we maintain consistency? All of these principles are great, but what does it actually look like, and how do we make it happen? So there's a couple different things. So we have the Writers Guild book. I explained what the Writers Guild was a little bit. So this is a book that, it's a document that provides the methodology for all writers at Wix. So the Wix Voice, that's where it lives. It's open to everybody at Wix, so they can read how we approach content as a whole. We also are working on glossaries. So we have glossaries for every product, and this is across all disciplines to keep all disciplines aligned so that a user coming from a landing page is getting the same terminology as a user does at the end of a flow or in knowledge base even. So this is how we can keep consistency across products. And then we also have an accessibility checklist. So I didn't have a chance to talk about this with the writing principles because we have a limited amount of time. But writing content that's accessible and inclusive is also very important to us. And this is one way that we can make sure that our content that we've worked so hard with these principles can be accessed, can be read, can be used by all types of readers, like I said, but no matter how you're interacting with the screen. And so this is a checklist. We also talked about it, I think, at our accessibility meetup like a while ago. If you're interested in finding out more about accessibility, I think we have a YouTube channel. Yeah, we do. But this is one way of maintaining consistency with our voice across readers and users, no matter how they're interacting with the content. We also are in constant communication with each other. So Dan will talk a little bit about some of the groups that we have, but we also have a Slack channel that's very active. All of the things that we think about when we're writing, we ask each other for help when we're looking at specific cases. And it's something that also keeps all of us aligned. Like if someone brings something up in a Slack channel, usually someone else is like, oh my gosh, I was just dealing with that. And they can talk about it. We can add it to some of our resources and stay aligned that way. And then we also are working on a standardization project. So standardization is what we've called it for lack of a better word. We don't believe you can do like copy paste at Wix. It just doesn't work, if you remember the gazillion products that we have. But we do want to basically take the writing principles that we just went through and apply them very tangibly to the most used content patterns or the most used components. So for example, we did empty states recently, and we took the ideas of front-loading information, of putting the most crucial information first, of being supportive and inspiring, and put that into action for these different components. So this is something that is a work in progress. We have a lot of different content to standardize, but it's really cool to see it come together and to be able to have conversations about the principles that we've all learned together. What does it look like in action? Okay, just really quick wrap up and covering what we went over. So how we write at Wix, we start with a strong foundation that's based on our voice, the structure of the company, and how we define our job. We say it, write it. If you remember nothing else, that's our thing. We always focus on the user, on their intent, on their journey, on their state of mind, on the benefit that they're getting. We use the 3 W's to help structure our content, and we write for all types of users, and we do our best to maintain consistency where we can. Like I said, this is how we do it. It is not a one-size-fits-all model, but I hope that there are pieces from it that you all can take home, that you all can apply, that can help you in your writing. And good luck. Okay, I think we have a couple minutes for questions, if anyone has questions right now. We're springing it on you. Yes. Wait, we need someone to get the mic to him, though.
Hi. Sorry, can...
I do not know if it's on. We need to test that. Testing. Oh, it is? No?
Yeah,
Is it? It's working.
I hope this question's worth it. Okay. You talked before about writing in Figma directly. It doesn't really work.
Wait. They can't hear you on Zoom, so we'll share.
For Zoom. Sorry, thank you. You spoke earlier about writing directly in Figma. One of the challenges we have is that we like to do sort of like prototyping or like wireframing. Do you guys do that at all? And if so, how do you convince your design partners to go for it? Thank you.
With content like in the wireframe or prototype?
Like a basic wireframe, because sometimes there are different design decisions, and so before you get started, if you have like a basic wireframe with some basic messaging points in there, a challenge we find is that people get really attached to the high res, and so once they see it there, if they need to change, it's very hard to change. Sorry for the people on Zoom.
It's a great question. So writing in like low fidelity wireframes is not something we tend to do. It's a conversation we've had at Wix with the product guild and product managers. Should we be? Because exactly what Yossi said, that if once content that isn't final content gets to the high fidelity wireframes or to the designs, people get really attached to it, and then it becomes like a battle sometimes. So we have talked about can we and should we be doing it in wireframes in low fidelity. We haven't decided yet that we should, only because of time. So when things are in the really early wireframing stages, it goes through so many iterations, and it can be difficult to be a part of all of those at that stage. So we're not doing that in that. Does that answer your question? So it's not just you with this challenge. Yeah, it's a really great point though. Yeah, does that mic not work at all? Do we know?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, okay. Someone has a question here. If you can raise your hand, okay.
Do you store the content separately outside of Figma?
So we have a content management system where that's like the source of truth of where all the content that's actually in production or was in production, maybe it's not now, lives. So we can always use that as a point of reference. We do typically also do different documentation of the content. How? Yeah, so because we have keys, we tend to do our own keys docs. So sometimes that means it's a visual thing where we have the Figma screen and then the keys, so we can see where they go. And because that's our document, we keep the content there. Not every team does that. At Wix, the Wix way is doing things differently per team, so I can't speak for everybody, but we also just we have a really good relationship with our designers. It really is based on trust that the content won't get deleted or something like that. And we also have our own content drafts page in the Figma file. So any versions that you've worked on, we store there. So they're there. No one else looks at them, or they shouldn't. No one else touches them. So that's also a way of keeping your versions without needing to save them somewhere else. Someone else has a question?
So you said you're already putting content in Figma, right, at a certain stage. But in general, when a designer is designing a page or something else, do you give out any content objective first, or you already work with a given design?
You mean like, do we work content first sometimes? Yeah, so we do. It really depends on the feature and the product and what the needs are. We do sometimes. It's not every time, but also because, like I said, we're part of the product team. Even if we're not necessarily working content first, where we're defining it first, we're there when we're coming up with the wireframes, we're there when we're making decisions on design. So we're also keeping in mind, hey, like this thing that we need to explain is really complicated, so I'm gonna need more space, and then we can adjust the design. Okay, I think that's it.
Yes, if anyone has any additional questions, we're gonna have a Q&A at the end of the evening. So if you didn't get a chance, hold on to it. Also, if you think of more as the evening goes by, at the end we'll have time for questions and answers.
Awesome. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. I am I'm super excited to introduce Dan Raz, who's going to be giving our next talk. It's so good. So stay tuned.